My name is Justin Baker. This is a research proposal for EDTE 6670, Teacher as an Action Researcher, for Dr. Brett Knoll in 2025 fall semester. I plan to study how incorporating student-generated instructional videos in my pedagogy inform my understanding of students' engagement and metacognitive development as part of a flipped classroom approach. First, we'll talk about the theoretical foundation and my plan for the study and the data I will collect, then how I'll analyze that data and an expected timeline of the study, with some anticipated outcomes at the end. This all started with my existing biology course, which takes up about 90% of the students that I teach. It has two strands, a regular course and an honors course, both of which I converted to a flipped classroom 2 academic years ago. This is the third academic year for that. As Dr. Baker from Cedarville University laid out in 2016, the flipped classroom approach is marked by students individually decoding text on their own and taking notes on prepared lecture videos outside of the classroom as preparation for applying the material in class during active learning. These are usually collaborative short-term projects, but can also be longer term as well. While Baker wrote about leveraging new technologies as the reasoning behind the flipped classroom approach, Lage et al. Spoke of using it to differentiate and meet the needs of more students in that classroom. Personally, I use it for both reasons. I leverage our online learning platform as well as create lessons that can cater to my individual students. Rehashing stuff face to face in small groups as a second tier instruction, while the larger group works on actively processing through, practicing, and modeling things that we learn outside the classroom. Students handle flipped classroom structure well, with over 85% of my students doing the individual preparatory work of reading and decoding text and watching and taking notes on my prepared videos every time. That's roughly 35 videos in my honors class and 33 videos in my regular class. The past years, I have built those up so that they can do a little better each time, as we are reflective teachers after all. However, I don't always have a good view on how much the students understand the material as they work on the in-class assignments because we are applying that information and they haven't always processed that information into their schema quite yet. So my goal here is to move students from this kind of top row of being content consumers in a flipped classroom with low student metacognition into content experts who have the ability to support each other in their learning with a higher amount of student metacognition. I want my students to have an underpinning of support by their peers and themselves, not just me as a source of information. While I know that creating artifacts is a great way for students to find the holes in their knowledge, I was curious about changing my instructional videos out for student-created content videos that can help my students move through the change and see peers as sources of information and see themselves as those content experts. Synthesizing all that into a single question was a bit much, and since the action research is focused on my own pedagogy rather than specific students or groups of students, I wanted to be very particular with my wording. I settled on asking how does incorporating student-generated content videos or instructional videos, sometimes I'm going to call those didactic videos as well, into my pedagogy inform my understanding of how students engage with content and develop metacognitive skills. Including how students engage the content itself with these metacognitive interests should let me see how the change in strategy affects student learning processes and impacts their achievement. The question's a bit dense, so unpacking it into some guiding questions can help explain what I'm looking for. These subdivide my central question. Firstly, I want to explicitly look at my own facilitation strategies that support student metacognition. Already in the process of just doing research for this project to create a literature review, I have found some tips and things that I'm going to be applying for the rest of the spring semester now at my biology and honors biology course. But I want to see how they can be incorporated into the process of students creating their own content videos, and I want to see how helpful each of them can be. Secondly, I want to ask how these strategies affect the students' video creation. I plan to see how students change their video production processes as they become better at gauging their own learning. So we're going to use 2 different units sequentially, not just a single unit. Thirdly, which patterns of engagement do I see as I task students with content video creation? I'll talk about this a little later, but it means that I need to document behavioral and conversational patterns as students work on the videos themselves in my classroom. Lastly, when students show their metacognition, how do they describe their thinking and learning? This will guide me to see how much metacognition will occur and how it changes over time. These questions will give me actionable findings that I can apply in my own classroom in the coming year as I continue to reflectively change my flipped classroom approach. This flipped classroom approach is grounded in a constructivism framework. Learning is an active and social process that requires scaffolding. Looking at Feldman and Ferreria's work on Piaget's strategies, we see that individual schema building happens through exposure and practice. We see this first through the pre-class preparations of decoding textbook readings and the out-of-classroom video lectures. These are personal learning experiences that repeatedly expose the learning brain to the content and allow it to expand their existing schema. Since these happen outside of class, the student is able to spend as much or as little of their time as needed in this phase. The natural constructivist follow-up to Piaget is, of course, Vygotsky. Moreno's educational psychology mirrors Feldman and Ferreria's view of social learning as learning progresses through Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. As students collaborate to apply what they're learning, they're able to fill each other's deficits during class time, building each other up. The flipped classroom model leverages both individual preparation and social in-class work as students build their comprehension. As students complete in-class work, they collaboratively generate artifacts, but this is not just busy work. It is not just getting reps or practice. Students are cognitively working out their knowledge. Moreno, Fiorella, Mayer all break regulated learning down into 3 phases: planning, monitoring, and evaluation. While creating any artifact involves the externalization of internal comprehension, Hoogerheide pushes this further and tells us that learning is deeper and lasts longer when the student expects that they need to teach others. So having students create didactic videos which aim to teach the content to others and not just communicate it drives them to move through the phases of planning, monitoring, and evaluating. This self-regulation of learning is a hallmark of students with a high level of metacognition. Stanton et al. And Mohammadi et al.'s case studies on flipped classrooms further call out peer feedback as a crucial part of what Stanton et al. Calls socially shared metacognition. These 3 meta-analyses of flipped classrooms looked at secondary students and how they work together to form better comprehension. So they're looking at that metacognition specifically. In collaborative environments, students are able to call out each other's misconceptions and errors and build up that information lacking bits of their schema. And while much research has been done on the undergraduate level, much of that has been only on the undergraduate level. The flipped classroom approach has been studied, and there's been almost no study of the impact on flipped classrooms on high schoolers. There's even less published research relating to parochial schools like the one I teach at. Hoogerheide et al. Have looked at the effect of students producing videos as a learning artifact, but again, at the secondary level. Their work appears to be one of the few studies on video production as evidence of learning at all. Similarly, Campbell et al. Looked at undergraduate students producing short-form videos that were about a minute long in a completely online environment and studied how they affected student engagement with the material. Again, not high school, not in person. Earlier this year, in March of 2025, Chet et al. Performed meta-analyses centered on the flipped classroom and metacognition, especially the self-regulation of learning, which was exactly what I wanted to look at. But their breadth of study was narrow and only included collegiate students at a couple of universities. Existing research overlaps with portions of my intended focus, but does not look at how students at the high school level, especially in a parochial school, interact with content that they create their own didactic videos within a flipped classroom approach. That brings us to how I want to study the impact of students creating their videos and on their engagement and metacognition. Just as in a regular flipped classroom, my students will first read through sections of the textbook that I will select, but instead of having lecture videos prepared by me, their instructor, they will collaboratively work to create those videos. I'm not going to leave them out to find information on the internet. We are going to stick to just the textbook information to keep the scale to a minimum. I'll also provide them with the publisher's PowerPoints, which I've converted into Google Slides so that they can use them on their Chromebooks more easily. I've also broken the material into sections as a preliminary bit of chunking because I'm not interested in finding out how they separate the information for themselves, and I want to keep their videos to 10 minutes roughly. Throughout the process, there will be micro lessons on metacognition, following the advice of Stanton et al., focusing on explaining and modeling effective strategies, encouraging reflection, and social metacognition. The students are familiar with working through bigger projects for me, but I'll also give them suggested timelines to help them complete these units in reasonable timeframes. I plan to circulate through each group at the beginning of the class period, checking in on what they plan to get done and answer questions as needed while collecting field notes. I have 11 students, and I plan to split them evenly into 3 groups that will each work together to create videos. My room has 3 large work tables that comfortably seat these groups. So let's talk more about the population of the study. It is a group of 11 underclassmen that have previously been through my biology course or the honors biology course and scored highly in either of them. When they were in my biology courses, they did well with the flipped classroom approach. The population is mostly female and is just over 50% Caucasian, with 2 African American students and 2 who have Latinx heritage. We're a mid-sized parochial school for our area, so this gives a fairly small cohort who have spent a lot of quality time together, even across the grade divide of juniors and seniors. I plan to utilize 3 groups, which I will generate pseudo-randomly using dice rolling, a group setting procedure that students are familiar with me using. My only criteria is going to be to split up the juniors across the groups to even out the workload that the students might be having from other classes. To my knowledge, there are no social barriers that I need to avoid. They all work well together. I do have one set of siblings that I will probably try to split up as well, but if they end up working together, they have shown that they can do that as well. From these groups, I plan to collect both quantitative and qualitative data, but the focus of the study will be primarily on my qualitative findings. I plan to give a pre-test before we start over content knowledge and some very basic application of that information, which will be paired with an end-of-unit test that will be formal summative assessments. My students are used to these, so this shouldn't be any new concept for them. But the content videos are going to be graded by a rubric that includes evidences of metacognition and peer review. Those will definitely be new for my students. They will be completing exit tickets aimed at gauging their metacognition, how well they think they understand the information, how well they think they can talk about it and convey those with each other. Students will complete these exit tickets not every day, but more than once a week. Throughout the study, I plan to collect my own lesson plans and taking field notes on their work. I'm going to be looking for measurable growth between the pre and post summative assessments, as part of my normal teaching of the units included in the study, but I'm also hoping to see an increase in the evidences of metacognition in sequential video rubrics. I plan to use either thematic or content encoding to perform a qualitative analysis. I will most likely establish a few codes to start with, then add more as I begin processing the video rubrics, exit tickets, lesson plans, and field notes throughout the process. This should allow me to see any common patterns that arise from the data without skewing it with my own views or expectations. I plan to use the first week of January, right after we return from Christmas break, to establish the students into their working groups and introduce them to the tools we will be using to generate the student videos using some of our previous sections of content. The pre-content assessment for Unit 7 will probably also happen on the last day of this week. It depends on how students do with picking up the new video creation software. But no matter what, the week of Monday, January 12th, will be the first real work week for the students as they start diving into the process of creating content videos, designing, rehearsing, and then recording them. I don't expect any to finish a content video this week, but they should have the groundwork for multiple videos at least laid by the end of the week. I will have micro lessons on the big ideas so they can better portion their video time and give exit tickets on how well they think they understand the content across the week using Likert scale responses. I plan to look for evidence of social media cognition, not social media cognition, social metacognition, like peer reviewing of video design and of the videos themselves before submission. The cycle will continue through the weeks of January 19th and January 26th, with the end of the week capping off with a post-content formal assessment. Student groups will be able to revise and resubmit their didactic videos until the end of the third week. That gives students a chance to go back and actually improve these videos and add anything they might have missed that wasn't caught by that social metacognition and peer reviewing. The end of the unit is going to also have its own exit ticket to kind of give them a chance to debrief and talk about how they thought it went. We're going to repeat that process in February, starting on Monday, February 2nd, and it's going to flow much the same. I believe that students work more fluidly in their groups during this second unit and have a better handle on the process during this unit, but we'll keep the same rhythms set in that first 3-week unit. I do want to plan a buffer week here, so I'm keeping the week of February 23rd as kind of an extra in case we have snow days, because we do live in Central Ohio and it's going to be February and January. But also, just because the flexibility of needing to work with high schoolers, I want to have a little bit extra time, an extra day or two, just in case we need it. I have a cooperating teacher that has agreed to run a focus group during this week as well to debrief the students on the study and the growth of their metacognition, but that's just a possibility. I'm not sure if that will happen or not. Again, it depends on our scheduling and how this works out, because it will be a new process for them, not just for me. I'm hoping the students have an increased amount of engagement with the content and to see them engage differently with the content throughout this process. I want to see them taking a real ownership of their learning as they increase in self-regulation, and I want to see them see and hear rather them use language that shows this. I want to see student growth as usual, but I want to see student growth differently. I want to see student growth in a personal learning ability, not just in being able to memorize and spit facts back out about the human body and how it works. Personally, I think the study will help me have a better view of my students and be better prepared to view my students in the future. One of the lessons I want to take away from the study centers around building metacognitive scaffolding into all of my courses, not just this one, but in my flipped biology classroom and my flipped honors biology classroom. As I said earlier, I've already seen some things that I want to incorporate there just from reading studies on metacognition and the secondary school level use of flipped classrooms. If students creating their own didactic videos works well within a flipped classroom approach, I may use these as one of the problems or projects or starts for the application phase of in-class work, but probably not very frequently with my honors biology and regular biology strands. It will probably be at the anatomy level. One of the things I would like to do, though, is, if it works well, is to start to build a quote-unquote library of content videos explained by students to students. The peer relationship here will be important even if it is just from year to year or group to group. As I close, I want to bring the focus back to the core of the proposal. How does asking students to generate their own instructional videos inform my understanding of their engagement and metacognition? It's not just an academic question for me. It's a practical one that has real applications for how I structure my classroom, how I scaffold learning, and how I support students as they become more aware of what they know and what they still need to work on. If the study reveals that student-created videos bring out deeper planning, better monitoring of understanding, and more meaningful self-evaluation, then I can integrate the practices into future units and future courses. I want to refine my pedagogy in ways that help students become stronger thinkers, stronger communicators, and ultimately, more self-regulated learners. As usual, we stand on the backs of giants. Here are my sources. Thank you for your time.